Hi, my name is David Knight, and welcome to those amazing Psalms. Psalm 49, answering the big riddle. I wanted to shoot this video in a cemetery because it seems like the most perfect setting for this psalm, which is a psalm about death and riddles, or the big riddle. Not the riddle of death, but the riddle of life. How do we live our life? This psalm is a psalm about death. 16 times in 20 verses, the poet refers to death, and the final word of the entire psalm is the word perish. But it's not a morbid psalm. It's an instructional psalm. It's a song about wisdom. The poet takes the first 4 verses of the psalm to call us all together, rich and poor, young and old, locals and foreigners, in fact, the whole world, because he knows we all need the wisdom of this psalm. The poet has a riddle to expound, and here at the cemetery we glimpse an answer to his riddle. The poet wonders why bad people so often succeed and much better people very often have a hard time. And what does this tell us about God and about us? In verse 5 and 6 he sings, "Why should I fear when evil days come, when wicked deceivers surround me, those who trust in their wealth and boast in their great riches?" He wonders, why am I intimidated by these wealthy people? Why do I feel so demeaned when the arrogant rich flaunt their superiority? Am I afraid that perhaps there are no moral boundaries in life, that there is no relationship between deeds and destiny? The riddle is, why do I feel I should be moral if it really makes no difference at all? The poet's answer to the riddle is, follow the money. Follow it all the way to the end. Take a good look, because this is where it all ends. The wealthy are gathered here right along with the poor. This is where we all end up. And here, our money is worthless. You can't take it with you, and you can't use it to buy a free pass. Verse 7 says, no one can redeem the life of another or give to God a ransom for them. Death is inescapable, and no matter how much money you have or how well connected you are, you can't buy your way out of this one, and no one else can buy you an exemption. You can't live forever, and sad to say, you can't prevent the inevitable decay of your body and of your life. In verse 10, the poet says, this is not rocket science. Any fool can see that we all come to the same end. There's no social distancing here. Death is the great equalizer. It treats us all alike. We all leave behind everything we owned. Our homes that we invest so much of ourselves into, one day we'll get the eviction notice and we'll have to leave. Someone else will move in, and our final resting place is here. Verse 11 says, their tombs will remain their home forever. Verse 12 summarizes, despite their wealth, people do not endure. We are like the beasts that perish. The Message says it even more bluntly. We aren't immortal. We don't last long. Like our dogs, we age and weaken and die. That's a sobering fact, and it is repeated again in the final verse. But the poet's main focus is not on death, but rather how we allow the truth about death to affect how we approach life. He's not berating the wealthy for their wealth, but he warns us not to look to riches for a sense of security. He warns us against trusting in our wealth, against being in awe of those who have it all. Verse 13 to 14 paints a grim picture of the unscrupulous rich, who are like sheep, and death is their shepherd. Like a sheep, they followed the way of death, and in the end, their shepherd devours his flock. It's a parody of the 23rd Psalm, where the faithful trust their Lord as their shepherd, and they lack nothing. The poet's language here is vivid. In verse 14, they will decay in the grave, far from their princely mansions. But there's a brighter prospect for the righteous. Verse 14 says, the upright will prevail over them in the morning, which expresses the biblical belief that contrary to appearances, the godly will be victorious. The meek will inherit the earth. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And another insight in verse 15 is the most remarkable assertion in the entire psalm. But God will redeem me from the realm of the dead. He will surely take me to himself. The righteous dead will never be homeless. They will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. This is the confidence that God will not abandon those who trust him. He keeps hold of them even in death. In verse 5, the poet observed that none of us can redeem ourselves from death, but here he declares that God is able to do just that. Redeeming is one of God's great specialties. Moses told Israel in Deuteronomy 7, God loved you and redeemed you from the land of slavery and from the power of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. It seems that our psalmist made the inspired leap that if God's power and love redeemed Israel from the tyranny of Egypt, surely God is able to rescue us from the tyranny of death and bring us home. God will surely take me to himself. Derek Kidner says this is one of the mountaintops of Old Testament hope. Our Redeemer God never abandons those who trust him. This all came into clearer focus with the coming of Jesus, who gave his life as a ransom for us all, redeeming us through his own lifeblood. As he was leaving his disciples, he said to them in a statement that seems to echo this psalm, if I go away, I will come back and take you to be with me. God will take me to himself. What a wonderful promise of hope, and what wisdom for the riddles of life. Psalm 49 is more about the way of wisdom than the way of worship. It doesn't teach us how to pray. It doesn't give us a theology of wealth about how to use our money for God's purposes, but it sings wisdom to us and warns us not to be captivated by the love of money. It says, do not be overawed when others grow rich, when the splendor of their houses increase, for they will take nothing with them when they die. Though while they live, they count themselves blessed, and people praise you when you prosper, they will join those who have gone before them, who will never again see the light of life. According to the psalmist, it's lights out for those who ignore the wisdom of this psalm. But if we take heed, the psalm does two things for us. It warns us against living as though money were the ultimate security, and it invites us to anchor our hopes for life and death in God as our Redeemer. He is the answer to the greatest riddle of life. Take care.